Are you ready for questions now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. And compliments to your family for working with you for your public service. You had the rare opportunity to clerk for not one, but two justices of the U.S. Supreme Court, Scalia, and then Judge Kavanaugh, when he was on the D.C. Circuit. What did those mentors teach you about the proper role of a judge, and how did they inform your judicial philosophy?
So much, Senator. From Justice Scalia, I learned, I think, what we all learned from Justice Scalia, which is how to interpret the text of our Constitution and laws. He was a profoundly influential justice, perhaps the most influential of the century in which he served, and his influence on me was very pronounced. I wanted to clerk for him from the first Scalia opinion I read as a 1L in law school, because no one more persuasively made the case for judicial restraint, for textualism, and originalism. And clerking for him was, the best possible training in those values. From Justice Kavanaugh, I also learned so much. I think the number one thing I learned, I'll describe it as energetic public service, which is to say, we in public service are supposed to, we work just as hard as someone who is billing a private client and getting paid by the hour. We take our obligation to the public profoundly seriously. And that means employing a very careful process to decide each case, no matter how long it takes, reading each brief carefully, deeply researching the law, and then writing in a manner that is so careful because your opinions need to withstand the tests of time and future testing in litigation.
The judiciary interprets laws to ensure the preservation of liberty guaranteed under the document. One of the most sacred is the right to free exercise of religion. Justice Kavanaugh recently said that the Supreme Court has, quote, made some good progress on recognizing the constitutional protection of religious equality and religious liberty, end quote. What are your views on religious liberty and the role of judges in protecting it?
Justice Kavanaugh is right, Senator. In about the last 12 or 13 years, the Supreme Court has issued opinion after opinion that has been strongly protective of religious liberty. And I would, of course, follow those faithfully as a lower court judge. I actually had the privilege of working on several of those matters while I was at the Solicitor General's office. I worked on and helped draft the brief in a case involving Thomas More Law Center against Becerra, challenging a California law, and there the Supreme Court agreed with our religious protective views. I worked on Espinoza against Montana, involving the Blaine amendments and funding for religious schools. I worked on Fulton versus City of Philadelphia, involving Catholic social services work to place foster children. And in both of those cases as well, the Supreme Court, holdings protected religious liberty, which was consistent with the arguments that we made. In addition, Senator, I am a proud and practicing Jew, raising 3 Jewish children. And I think as a Jewish American, you would have to be completely historically illiterate to be anything but profoundly grateful for this country's tradition of religious liberty. And that tradition protects not just the religious among us, but also secular values. I mean, if you think back to the sort of canonical phrasing in West Virginia against Barnett, the case involving the Pledge of Allegiance, saying something like, if there's any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it's that no official can tell citizens what is orthodox in the areas of religion, politics, or morals. And so that's, I think, an example of how the Supreme Court's protection of our religious freedoms really inures to the benefit of all Americans.
You appeared before this committee several years ago in defense of Judge Kavanaugh's nomination. His hearing was tainted with unfair political attacks on his character, but your testimony as a woman who worked closely with him provided critical insight into Justice's competency and temperament. How did Justice Kavanaugh's commitment throughout the confirmation hearing and his jurisprudence influence you?
The experience of watching and supporting Justice Kavanaugh's confirmation was a formative one. I remember thinking to myself many times that his commitment to public service, energetic public service, must be very strong to go through all of that. I was very honored to appear before this committee in 2018. I actually had with me the littlest one there. She was a newborn. And so she came and she sat right outside the door there with a babysitter while I testified. And Senator Kennedy, I'm sure you don't remember, but at the airport later that day, our flight was 7 hours delayed, and I was there with a very fussy baby, and Senator Kennedy ran into me and was extremely kind. So I remember that very well. And I'm very honored to be here before you again, ideally in less contentious times and circumstances.
Thank you, Senator Durbin.
Ms. Taibleson, you were doing just great until you mentioned